Yeah, I started surveying in 2005. Um, Family has a background in construction, and I started surveying in 2005, knowing nothing about anything about survey, and then went to school for it a little bit, worked with it, went through like an apprenticeship type program. 2015, we incorporated, not really knowing what that would mean exactly, but definitely needed to get something going.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast, where we are focused on helping businesses that are in that 1 to 3 million range figure out how to move forward. And we do that by bringing in real live business owners who are wrestling with those same things, who are going through some of those same challenges or have recently, and who are willing to share some of the things they've learned that have helped them, and also get into some of the things that they're currently dealing with that might be useful to somebody else. So today's guest is no exception. He's a business owner like you and me. He's built this thing by blood, sweat, and tears, and he's here to share some real things that have happened and things that he's wrestling with today. So let me introduce you to Daniel Meyer. Daniel started up Meyer Land Surveying about 8 9 years ago, and he has been growing his company, and he's here to be with us and share some things. So welcome to the show, Daniel. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Why don't you give everybody a little bit of a backdrop? I mean, most of us have an idea of what a land surveying company might be, but if you just give us a little backdrop on what you guys focus on, maybe where you're located, the kinds of projects or people you serve, that'll just give us some nice context for our conversation.
Okay. We're located in the high desert of California. Our office is in a place called Oak Hills, and we focus most of our work is on construction, uh, staking, and design. But we do a wide range all the way down to residential type work for property lines up to larger things. Um, we do some jurisdictional work. We do drones. A lot of people ask about drones. Can you do drones? We do some work with drones. We do a lot of design surveys, and we work pretty much all over Southern California.
All right. So you're helping people get clear about where those property lines are or how the land is laid out. So that's awesome. And you've been doing this. You told me you started in 2015, the company officially. You've been doing it personally, though, much longer than that.
Yeah, I started surveying in 2005. Um, Family has a background in construction, and I started surveying in 2005, knowing nothing about anything about survey, and then went to school for it a little bit, worked with it, went through like an apprenticeship type program. 2015, we incorporated, not really knowing what that would mean exactly, but definitely needed to get something going. I still was working for somebody part time, full time mixture there through 2015, and then by 2016, um, we kind of took that scary jump of being completely on your own without any security of
Took the
another job.
leap.
Yeah,
Yeah, the leap. Where we all remember the leap. Well, many of us do. Working for somebody else and the what we think is security of working for someone else, but boy, once you get into it and you're like, oh, actually, I get to control my own destiny and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it seemed like a leap at first, but at least for me, it was like, oh, now I can't imagine going to work for somebody else. But anyway, I remember that first moment as well. So let's get into. We talked a little bit about some things that have been helpful for you, or things that you've learned over the years of growing your business. I'd love to have you share the one you talked about with me before we hit record, which had to do with hiring somebody to help with certain things. Why don't you set that story up and we'll get into it?
so basically, one of the things I find that's most difficult when you're hiring somebody and what we do, and I'm sure it's similar in other industries, is having somebody that has a mind that understands the surveying, can visualize the surveying, and can make good judgments along the way. And you kind of need that all the time. And we've learned that so we get the question, hey, what's the training program? What's the training program? And sometimes the training program is just getting your hands dirty and giving it a try, and then learning to make a good judgment. And this is really important between presumption and initiative. We really appreciate initiative, but learning the difference between presuming something and making huge errors, because our errors are not huge, like looks small, but it results in huge consequences for what we do. Um, and that was a really hard thing to try to teach. And I don't know if it's teachable or if it's just how each person's made and finding the right type of individual. And as I was sharing with you, like you throw me into music and said, "Hey, I need you to do this." I'm going to fail at that, but I'm okay at this. I didn't know I was good at this actually. I just did it for work, and then I started realizing over time, like I'm actually okay at doing this. Um, and yeah, that was I guess almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago. So
So you've developed some ability and you might have some natural ability, but then how did you start to realize if somebody else had it or not? Because what you alluded to was, not everybody has what it takes to do this. So you sort of put them in to see, but what have you found that has helped you as you're trying to find team members? What have you found that gives you signals as to whether or not you're going to have the right person?
a little bit of it, well, not a little bit. A good chunk of it is their attitude, humility.
Hmm.
One of the huge red flags for me is if somebody thinks they know everything when they come in, or they use long paragraphs to try to describe something, and not just getting to the point. Those are usually red flags um, right away. And then if their approach is like, I'm not sure, I don't know, usually in our industry, that's good because that means you're going to question yourself on everything, check everything you do, double check everything you do because it's important because you're giving somebody a final answer. um, and experience, as your experience grows, those judgments look like they're instantaneous, but they're really not. Still a lot of debate in your mind. It's just quicker. And a long time ago, somebody told me the key to being a surveyor, a good surveyor, is making good judgments. That's what it's all about. Even when you're taking the test, it's really about drawing out your ability to make good judgments. Not just can you memorize regulations and math formulas, but can you make good judgments given the circumstances in front of you?
Yeah, the stuff that's outside of the formulas and the known, right? Like you got to make judgment. So, okay, I
Right.
love that description. Now, everybody who's listening will have a different type of role or different type of person that they have to get good at finding. But whatever it is, we have to get clear for ourselves what makes a good person in this role, and then how might I judge whether or not that person is a good person for the role. And we got to set up selection processes that help us to see that the best that we possibly can. And even if we do it well, we might get it wrong sometimes. But how would we know that we're getting it wrong? How do we notice that faster? And how do we move on that as quickly as we can so we can get to that right person as quickly as we can? I think that's helpful just to think through that. So thank you for that, Daniel. You also mentioned to me a time when you hired somebody, I think, to help with bookkeeping
All
and
right.
what that did for you. Do you mind telling that story?
Yeah. So early on, when I first started this, I was still working full time. So it was after work and the weekends, that kind of thing. A lot of late nights, early mornings, and still making your other employer happy, and not just happy, but doing a good job for them because you have that responsibility. And then once I made that leap, that jump, I was really busy working, literally up to midnight, sometimes later, up at 4 a.m. To get back out to the job because it was just me with a little bit of help. And then that help came and went, and the field side. But then it came to a point when I kept saying, I can't get to billing, I can't get to this, but you need that for the revenue, and I can't afford to hire somebody. And finally, I made the choice to try to hire somebody, and I did it. It was almost like putting a blindfold on and saying, and like rolling the dice, hoping it works out. And I'll tell you what, it was probably one of the best things I did, getting that help, bringing somebody in. And there wasn't a lot of, honestly, I didn't tell you this earlier, but there wasn't a lot of people that knew everything that needed to be done or had the experience that was available, but finding somebody that was willing to learn. And I remember them sitting there kind of staring at the computer a few times and asking questions. But what was really important was the questions weren't being asked over and over again. And she was learning and she was really helpful. And over time, you realize like, I don't know how I could afford not to have this person work for me.
Yeah.
Um, and we've since had her move on for her personal life, but and that's made it difficult trying to fill that role. And we got like two different people part time trying to fill that role, and it's kind of difficult in it. And on everybody, actually, everybody in the whole office didn't realize how much they relied on that one person that they thought probably didn't. I can imagine they probably thought, oh, that person doesn't do anything, but they don't realize that person makes sure they get paid, make sure we have money to pay them, and make sure that all our paperwork's in line with the state to make sure we're compliant with all these different things. So
Yeah, I love when you shared that story with me. First, you said, I didn't know how I would afford this person. Like I couldn't see
yeah,
the math didn't work, right? It's kind of like you're a guy who has to know math and formulas. And as you looked at the math, it's like this doesn't add up, but I need help. And
correct.
so you took the leap with the blindfold, rolled the dice, and then you couldn't imagine not having her after she got to that point of really adding value. It was like, oh, I feel the weight coming off of me,
Correct.
and
Yep.
that's just a huge difference maker. What did it do for your ability to go out and get more projects or get more done?
Well, it allowed me to be able to focus more in the field at that time initially when I was in the field mostly, probably 70 to 80% of the time. And then that percentage started flopping to where then I was in the office. And then working more directly with her and be able to, answer really difficult questions for her that she wasn't a surveyor. So
Mm,
she's like, what in the world's going on with this or that. But it helped me to be able to develop more revenue, to build those relationships, build trust. So with what we do, it's really important that you build trust. Sometimes the client's not so concerned about the cheapest price,
mm,
but can they trust you to do a good job? Because a poor job is much more expensive and stressful and causes more delays than doing it correct the first time. So building that relationship and allowing us to, oh, and not just that, but just to spend more time trying to get more work, sending out proposals. And it seems like it's simple when you look at a proposal, but it just takes a lot of time. So
yeah. So by freeing yourself up from some of those other tasks where you didn't have to be the one doing it, now you can go work on things that are building the capability of your business, that are generating more revenue, that are allowing you to deliver on more projects or jobs. Like there are lots of ways for us to spend our time, and when we can let go of or delegate things that can go to somebody else, we actually can grow the business in other ways. And it's hard to see it when we're like, where's the money going to come from when I hire
right.
this person?
Well, when I
But
started the business, I thought to myself, well, I can do that task and I can do that task and I can do that task and I can do that task. And I can figure out those tasks with a little help and advice,
mm,
and you have all these things and you're like, I can wear all the hats. But the reality is there's not enough time to wear every hat.
yeah,
It gets overloading and you still have a family. And that's why you're doing this. So you can't sacrifice your family.
yeah,
But you can show your kids that you work hard. It's not to say that I want to sit around at home all day and show
right,
them that this is life. That I want to show them that you work hard, but you still want to spend time with your family.
yeah,
And
yeah,
those late nights, those midnights, I remember early on, I would sit there. We'd have my three screens up, and just after dinner, I'd go back to work, and some of the kids would just come sit at my feet and just hang out with me. And then after they got to bed and took that break, put everybody to bed, then my wife would come in. We'd turn on a show for her to sit next to me while I was working on the other two screens. She would watch a show on the other screen, and that kind of lasted for a long time doing it that way. So
yeah. Well, until you take that leap of hiring that first person, and then that second person, then that third person, like you're carrying it all at first, and then you learn that we got to go from learning and doing to leading, and that's
yeah,
that's the transition. And now you've done it and you felt the benefit of it, and you wonder, how in the world did I think that I was just going to do it all to begin with? But good lesson learned. Thank you for sharing that. um, let's shift gears now, Daniel, to today. You're working to grow, you've got more people, um, and on this show we don't get into sales and marketing and revenue growth as much as we do the business development or the organization development, the people, processes, and systems that you're learning how to do in order to scale the business. Is there a particular challenge that you'd be willing to share here that might be relevant to others that I could help with?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of the same situation again. Because I am the license holder for the company,
Mm,
I have a certain amount of responsibility that I can't let go. I have to be in direct charge of all the work being done on top of running the business. And you would think that maybe my inclination would be to figure out how to free up the business side of things so that way I can do more of the technical side. But my my work right now, I guess my task right now in front of me is I'm trying to find that perfect fit to come in and take over my role as the licensed person.
mm.
And even if they're not quite licensed, almost licensed. And I've talked to a few people, and we may be able to work something out with somebody here soon, which would be great. But there's going to be a little bit of training, showing them how we do things, that kind of thing. But I'm hoping that it's going to be the same type of thing, because I honestly think to myself, like, how in the world am I going to afford another professional salary? Um, I don't even uh, I don't even put myself at the professional salary necessarily. I just hope the business is successful, you know. And but when I hire somebody from outside, I know what those requirements are, and so I'm going to have to pay them that, make that commitment. And I know we can do it, but it's again, it's not as scary as the first time, even though it was a much different salary. But it's very similar in that it's like I need to find that person, get them trained, show them how much of the business they need to know, because you're never, when you're in charge, you're never separated from it. 'Cause you got to know budgets, you got to know billing, you got to know all that stuff so they can take control. I'm trying to find that person that would take this one office that I have and lead it, so that way I can focus more on the processes and cleaning those things up, and then expanding into other regions so we don't have to drive as far from one location, and we can duplicate that somewhere else.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, Daniel, that the thing you shared about hiring that first person to help with payroll and bookkeeping kinds of tasks, the same issue is the one that you're working through now, just at a different level with the licensed engineer, the licensed professional and a much higher salary. That's you got a similar thing going on. It's like, well, I don't know how I'm going to afford this. Let's just call it a six-figure salary for somebody in California with those kinds of credentials. I imagine that's a hefty pill to swallow to say, wow, how am I going to get that?
Right.
Um, but yeah, so I feel that. Um, what does it mean to you in the business if you're able to find that person? Like, how does it help
For,
the business move forward?
For me, it will help me to be able to not be so scattered, for one, because right now I'm trying to assist everybody. So it's almost like reverse roles right now. I'm almost like the assistant to everybody, because you hire somebody. Um, when it comes to the technical things, even if I have somebody that's fully capable across the hall here, they don't want to step all over my license and my responsibility and that burden. So they're asking lots of questions, and that's part of being in charge of it and making sure that you have people that respect that, because you're the one that's responsible at the end of the day for what goes out to the client. Not only are you responsible to that one client, but how that client's project you're working on affects its neighbors, and you're responsible to the state ultimately to protect your neighbors. That's what it's all about. That's
Yeah.
what the whole point of a license is. So if I had somebody else that is competent and is licensed and can take that role, that would allow me to then focus on a little bit more on the people who need more development. It would help me to focus more on finding that right person to fill like the part-time role. Like I have one role that's being filled part-time by two part-timers to fill the role, but and that's because of their schedule and their own personal goals. But it would help me to be able to focus on finding that right person to fill that role completely. It helped me to be able to work with other companies that can help us, like
Mm.
software companies and things like that. Because some that's a lot of work. Like you think like, oh, there's this great software out there that can help you and they can market it to you and you can see all the advantages, but there's implementation processes and that takes time. And whenever you're split so many ways, you just don't have the time for that.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Whether it's a new process, some sort of software, helping develop a team member, opening up another location is another thing you said earlier. Is like we're spread out right now because we're all operating out of this one licensed
Right.
person's ability to get around. But if we had, another place, maybe we could get more projects done. Anyway, I feel that I can totally see the challenge there. So So let's dive in on this a little bit. Right now, we have a member in our elite entrepreneurs community who has an engineering firm, and so they do design engineering for buildings, commercial buildings. So there's an architect, but the architect works with this engineering firm on the plumbing system, or on the HVAC system, or on the fire control sprinkler systems. And so they're the engineers who drop all those plans and make sure that everything's going to work right. And they have what's called a stamping engineer. Okay, it's a lot
Oh yeah,
similar to what you're talking about. Like, this is the person whose name goes on this thing, so that if
right,
something, they certify that it's done right, that's going to be okay. So I get the concept that you're the one with the license who has to make sure that all the neighbors are protected and we're all going to get along well. Um, so I totally get that. And what I think your natural instinct is correct here. It's like, if we can find somebody, even if they're not quite there, but you can help get them there, get their license under your business, and then start moving in this direction where you don't have to be the assistant to everybody, just like it was when you hired that first person to help you with payroll and other tasks. You're going to feel that coming off of you, and then you're going to be able to focus on other things, just like you said. So here's a couple ideas that I hope are helpful to you and others, especially on the affordability side. Like, how can I afford to bring in somebody at that level? Well, let's look at a few things. One is that usually in our minds, we see the annual salary, we see the annual burden of that, the pay, the benefits, the taxes. We think about that big annual number. And while we don't need to do any head fake on ourselves, we're not trying to do ninja tricks on ourselves. Um, that number's really big, and we shouldn't be thinking about that number, because when you hire somebody, you're not out that number, right? When you hire somebody, you're out that number a pay period at a time. So I would invite you
right,
to consider the math of, well, what is 1 month going to cost me?
right,
And what would I need to know after 1 month to see that this is actually working for the business? Well, is it 3 months that the payback time happens? Is it 4 or 5 months? What is the period of time that will free me up to get them onboarded, free me up to start doing other things that grows the revenue to be able to afford this person? And think about it in terms of the monthly investment versus the annual nut to crack, because that big number is kind of scary. But if you think about 1 month at a time, like, okay, if I save up, let's say, 4 or 5 months of runway for that, and I have a high confidence that by the time we get there, the business will be at a place that can afford this role. That's just a little bit easier to work through mentally than that big jump. Does that make sense?
oh yeah. Following is it's really a cash flow thing, is what you're describing. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like right now we're looking at possibly another office, and I'm looking at how much the rent is for the office. But I know when we start, we're gonna have guys stay there out of town until we get that office staffed. So I need an office where they could stay. Well, I found offices where they can stay, but no overnight parking. So then I'm like, okay, well, maybe we make the office a condo. So then you start looking at the rent a condo. And I'm going, I might as well just buy the place, because it's and $1 million for a property sounds like a lot, but when you look at a monthly cost for an office in that region, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And now you own some real estate that might be more valuable later, right? So,
Right.
yeah, you're looking at similar approach. The other thing I would introduce is the idea of revenue per employee. And what I've found with this number that's helpful is, if you look back historically on the you know Meyer Land Surveying history, if you look back, you would see the revenue going up over time, and you'll see the team going up over time. But what we don't always do is go a step further and just watch the tracking of that revenue per employee. So the first time you brought somebody on, the revenue per employee dropped immediately, right? Because now there's a new person, and the
Right.
revenue didn't change. But how long before that revenue per employee number went back up to where
Yeah.
it was at the same or better position than before? And then you go hire the next person, and then it drops immediately. And then you see how long it took for that to climb back up. And so you watch that pattern of revenue per employee in your rearview mirror to give you a little bit more confidence about how long it might take to get back to where we need to be to feel comfortable, right? And you want to target that revenue per employee where it's like, okay, we're not strapped all the time. We're not feeling that pressure all the time that we're gonna, not be able to make, I don't know, pay a vendor or make payroll or whatever. So when we're healthiest, what is our revenue per employee and how has that tracked over time? And by looking back, that might help us project how long it would take to break even on a new role, for example.
Right. No, I'm following you. That makes sense. I've experienced that. I've also experienced when you make a bad choice, somebody that doesn't create revenue. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then if you wait too long to take care of that problem, it grows and it grows and it grows. And then you climb it and then you have to climb out of it with all your revenue making employees. So I've made
that's
that
right.
mistake as well.
Yeah.
And the same thing again, afraid of, well, what am I going to do if I let this person go? I need to replace them with somebody, and with a limited pool of, I would just say, talent and even willingness to learn a talent. It seems like it's a different environment than when I first got into the workforce. Like, you were fighting for your job and you're thankful for anything you got. Now it's like, hey, you want a job? I don't know.
Yeah,
Kind of, it's completely different. Um, and so there's, I guess, some psychological adjustment there on how to approach the situation there as well. But it
yeah,
has to be done. And I learned that, like, okay, now that they're gone, it actually relieves some stress.
it
And that
does.
stress was actually worth the dollar amount. And now we're rebuilding from there and fixing that issue.
You took us back to lessons learned really fast, and I'm glad you did. I can't emphasize enough how many business owners I talk to that learn that lesson, but it's so hard when you're in the middle of it to see if I let go of this person, we're going to be hurting because we'll be down a person. But when you finally rip that band-aid off, it's like, oh, we're actually better off without them, at least in
Right.
some ways. We don't have, maybe we don't have the drama, maybe we don't have the mistakes, maybe we don't have the poor client experience, maybe we don't have, whatever downside is that came with that person. It's just it's just better, and then when we solve it, everybody goes, wow, why didn't we do that sooner, right?
Right. And we
uh,
all got a little bit more work, but then when we're talking to new people and interviewing them, there's a lot more insight from everybody. Like, the other managers are like, I don't know about that person because they kind of have the same issue and we're going to be back to square one. Or, oh, this person would be great, but they're a little far away and that could be a little issue because they say they want to work, but it's going to be 3 months in. And after they drive 2 hours every day to work, after a while, they're just going to quit because that's a lot. That's a lot just to get to work to start. It's not like you're getting to the office and you drive 2 hours and then you do your job, but you're getting paid the whole time. That's different.
that is different. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a way different thing. So yeah, what do? Buy people Audible subscriptions and, you know um, I don't know, memberships at some breakfast burrito place and say enjoy your drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard, but the right people are willing to do those things and show up for you. So I guess that brings us to maybe one last point to mention before we wrap this up, and that would be the type of environment that you create on the team. It ought to be one of the most, I don't know, precious or sacred things, if you will, and maybe that's feeling over the top, but how do you create a team environment, a workplace where people can belong, and where
Right.
where the rest of the team is like, no, they belong, and that's the type of place that people are willing to do those long drives for. Yes, you have to pay them enough money, and it goes a long way if you create an environment, a team, a purpose or a cause that feels like they can contribute in meaningful ways. When you create that level of uniqueness, that says a lot and keeps people connected and engaged and loyal and inviting, referring to other friends like, hey, you got to come check this out, this is a great place to be. And so that's just one more thing that I'll throw out there as a wish for you and anybody listening who might have a hard time finding those great people. It's like you can do a lot to create an environment where they get pulled in, and then once they're
I,
there.
I notice with our field guys, it's like if there's some sort of competition there and they can give each other banter after work about beating them or being better than each other. And that seems to be something that people have always liked in our industry. At least I've observed that. I thought so. There's always kind of like a little bit of a hazing period amongst the guys where they tease each other. And I think that's natural in any work environment to a certain degree, as long as it doesn't go too far. It's just kind of a natural way for people to get to know each other. And um, a lot of our the field with our business, not all of our businesses, but a lot of them in Southern California is union. So within that union, when I first started, it was like hardcore hazing, like
Mm,
make you not want to come to work. But then there's somehow at the end of it, it builds like this long-term camaraderie amongst everybody. And no matter where you go, you keep in touch.
yeah,
It's kind of weird.
it is kind
And
of
I know
weird.
our culture says not to do that, but in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I hated life for like a couple months, but at the same time, it was a different environment. I didn't. I was thankful to have a job. I wasn't going to go run off somewhere because I knew jobs were hard to get because everybody wanted a job, so you dealt with it. But then in the end, it built your character, and it built camaraderie between people. It's kind of weird. It's not what you're told
Right.
that's going to happen.
This little twisted approach to building camaraderie, and it's one way, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way, but the principle behind that is if everybody goes through this initiation or hazing kind of process, that's a path to shared identity. Like we all know what it's like. We all went through
Yeah.
that. And it's like now, I'm in the club, or I'm in the gang, or I'm in the, to take this extreme, I'm in the cult, which is at the core of culture, right? It's like
Yes. Correct.
there's this thing, and we all belong here.
Yeah,
Uh,
and if it's like a hard day at work and you're out there and it's 115 degrees and nobody's enjoying it, but it's in 6 months when you're talking about how miserable you were, then again, it builds camaraderie. It's those difficult things that makes the team come together as long as they work together through it,
yes,
and not just give up or get bitter. And if you get bitter, then that creates destruction.
yeah. If you get bitter, or you start to want to like pull people down or sabotage each other, that's not healthy. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point to bring up. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, Daniel, how can people learn more about Meyer Land Surveying, or find you guys, or connect with you online? How would that happen?
Mainly, we just have our website, meyerlandsurveying.com. And if you do construction work or engineering work and need those services, you can always give us a call and talk to myself or Tim or Greg here at the office. And depending on your project, you get directed to the right person and help you be successful in that project as well as any others.
Well, you never know what's going to happen when you do something like this. You're talking to owners all over the country, and even other parts of the world. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some local connection that ends up happening. It's like, hey, I heard you on a podcast, and yeah, so we love it when stories like that happen. Well, thanks again for being here and sharing both the lessons that you've learned that will be helpful to others, as well as some of the real challenges you're dealing with today. It's very helpful. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, for everybody out there listening, please share, like, review, comment, do all those things so that we can help as many seven-figure business owners as possible get a hold of these episodes and learn these lessons so that they can skip some of the learning curve. We'd love to help you and as many of your friends as possible. All right, that's it for this episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. We hope you'll tune in next time.